Okay, good evening everyone. This is Nivarthi Jairam and welcome to the next session of the Seekers, the Book Readers Club. And today we are going to talk about the lessons from the Turn the Ship Around, one of the great books that is applicable to every context and every individual's life. So to do that and to do the honors, we have Mr. Akhilesh Chaturvedi, who is a learned scholar that I know quite well of, and someone who can boast of having thousands of books physically at his home and more than that on his library. So, yes, welcome Akhil to the session. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well and happy to come back again and share my learnings from one of the books. And thank you
Wonderful.
so much for that.
Okay, great. So, what is that actually, makes you so passionate about this book, Akhil?
Yeah, this book which we talked is a Turn the Ship Around. Um, a very interesting book which talks about a Navy submarine, so nuclear submarine, and how that particular ship has been turned around to be the worst marine to the top of the performance at the top of the submarines, right? And when I picked up this book, I felt that in IT or whatever the performance which we are going through, or if you want to make any changes in organizations, there are possible ways that we have to make it. And leadership makes a very significant role to turn around the ship of the IT as this marine has made that.
Hmm.
And when you look at this particular book, it talks about the leadership models which was existing in the past, how that is not working or would not work in the change world of 21st century, where we have intensively moved from labor oriented work to a knowledge oriented work, be it a submarine or be it is IT industry. So we are in the knowledge work. And what would be the consequences if we continue to work like the older method of leadership, which we'll talk about in a while, and what would be the next level and how he has experimented with it in the submarine, and interestingly, what results it has produced.
Hmm.
And also, when I was reading this book, I came across a couple of guys, couple of coaches at enterprise level, and they said that we use this book in our leadership in the agile transformations or the business agility transformation, and see that what is the importance of the leaders, the way they think about. So
Hmm.
we'll talk about it, that how do you set the ground, what you do really. It goes into that space, and then it starts talking about the leadership model which he has put together in the three more sections of this book.
Hmm.
Very interestingly, fascinating, the first section of the book, it it almost gives you a place to reflect and think about what are you doing, how are you coming across as a coach or as a leader with your team.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's fascinated me. Indeed, it gave me the space and reflect on my own interactions in my family, in my workspace, and also when we do a coaching or kind of a leadership which we do with the teams.
Yeah, I also see that, right? It's all about how you show up as an individual, as a leader, as a coach in the organization at any given point in time. And it's nice to have Deepak here. Deepak, nice to have you part of the session. Welcome, and long time we haven't seen you. So maybe when we get a chance, we would like to get you on stage and have a overview of the book as well. Thanks for joining us. Okay, great. So, Akhil, I see that the book talks about different aspects. One, how you show up as a leader, right, and what you seek to provide to the people in terms of the vision that you are looking at, right? What you are trying to accomplish and what you are trying to resolve if there are any issues that you have in front of you. And it also talks about other elements of building the competence. And I see a lot of people talking about distributed leadership today, but I was surprised when I started looking at the book that even at that point of time he is talking about leaders at all levels, right? So that is what is distributed leadership and the decentralized decision making that we talk about. Yeah. Is it?
Interesting point. Distributed leadership. I think there is no distribution at all in this book. If you look at that whole system, he said everybody is the leader.
Yeah, that's what I mean when we say
Yeah.
distributed leadership,
Yeah.
right?
And it's everybody is the leader with one particular caveat, right? So you are the leader who is driving, who is navigating. You're taking this marine and going. So accountability lies with you to make sure that you return back after 6 months time or 189 days back to the sail, right? And how you have done this 189 days or 180 days of work, right? That is important accountability with you.
Yeah.
Apart from that, how the things gets done is up to the team, and how do you make sure that they feel responsible, they feel accounted for whatever they are working, right? And that's a very interesting thinking. And if that's the distributed leadership, I think that's what it is talks about, right? That everyone is this. And the way he has put together, I think Nivarti, you and me, we have been doing coaching for a very long time. We always talk about the human's potential.
Yeah.
Very enormous, right? And he says that when you make people leaders, they start seeing the potentials of theirs. They start making use of it. And how he turned around that ship and it became the high performing, the top of the Navy SEALs, like which I think they had 60 or 70 fleet, right? And then different squadron.
Yeah.
And that started becoming top, and everybody started talking about, and all of a sudden, that had changed the entire marine, the entire navy of the US, right? So that kind of impact can be created by this leadership model, which made me amazed that when you create that set, when you create that particular culture, when you see that happen, the others also learn from it, right? And otherwise, in the beginning of the book, he talks about how laughable that particular submarine was, what people were talking about it. Yeah, so there are two sides of the same thing, and there are no difference, right? The organization is the same, but how the leaders are behaving, how the leaders are treating their people, make the difference in your transformation journey or the change journey as such, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So Deepak is also here. Deepak, can you show us your video or something if you can? And you can always join us.
Yeah, let me try and invite Deepak to stage. I'm not sure if he can join, but yeah, why not? Let's try and see if we can have Deepak here. Yeah, there we have Deepak. Okay, I think I need to give him permission to use his. Yeah, Deepak, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Absolutely.
Yes, Deepak, you're audible. Can you switch on your video, please?
Hello. My video is turned on.
Okay. We are not able to see you as such. So.
Oh yeah, even I don't see it. Maybe there's a lag in the network or something.
Okay. So, Deepak, thank you so much and taking your time to join us. And before I go, Dimi and Nivarti, and then we get involved, Deepak as well. Deepak, when I was reading this book, and the first it says that why this book is important, and as we talked about Nivarti, that the leaders across, right? So it is not only this book for the leaders, but also for the people who all are working. And I'm not going to say that they're subordinates or they're followers, right? Everybody. This book is for everybody. And then if you make a distinction that yes, the top leaders learn how to release the passion, the intellect, and the energy of the people who are working with him. Yeah, so that's the one. So it talks about that. It gives you these details. Then for the people who are working in the organization, it says that how can you embrace the decision making? How can you start making the decisions, right, on behalf of the organizations? And how can you make easier for your bosses to let go of their control? So they're all bosses had been a very control freaks, I believe. And I don't know, and I'm very publicly to say that yes, I have come across bosses in my life who are very controlling, and I don't know what I have learned, but there are enough number of people, and I've seen that he allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. So this book was also reflecting my journey when I was working with him, or with my boss, or that particular organization, where I was allowed to do the work, and that had changed my life, right? And the point which is making out here in this book is that human beings' genius, passion, loyalty, and creativity comes by voluntarily only. You can't make somebody to show their genius, show their passion, show their loyalty, this or creativity. It all comes by volunteering them, right? That he is willing to bring that to the table, right? That's the one thing which I picked up from this, and it felt like it is talking about in the agile world we require to bring it if you want to really get to the place where you want it to. How do you make people volunteer for that? Right? And that's the leadership is, and it's at all level as talking about, right? And it also in this book it talks about the problems cannot be solved being at the same level. You need to find out the other level, right? Somebody talked about it, and nothing but the greatest scientist of the last century and this century as well. It talks about the world's greatest problems are solved by passionate and unleashing voluntarily, right? And I was reading an article yesterday that an under 10th pass father in China has developed a medicine for his 2-year-old son, and his condition started improving, right? He passionate about it. He was solving that problem which has not been solved by many. It is not available in China, that kind of a medicine, and he's able to read to the internet and find out the ways, and he is now his son is kind of started getting into a different space. The symptoms are started going off, and there are a number of companies who are the manufacturing medicines, right? They're inviting him that what theory you have done, what is that you have done to get to that particular level, how did you discover this medicine, right? So it's amazing, and that point states that yes, the world's greatest problem can be solved when you are passionate about it. He became passionate, so are you creating the condition for passion? And he's volunteering, right? He's taking the risk. He's consuming that medicine by himself or putting onto the rabbits or some other places, and by that he has improved the medicine and started giving to his son. This is one of the examples yesterday I found, right? Which resonated with me. Yes, Deepak. So this is with this. Let's get. I mean, your Deepak is also voluntarily come here, right? We never forced Deepak to come here and join us in this group.
Yes. If you want me to say that on record. It's an absolute pleasure, Akhilesh and Nivarti, to talk to you at any point in time, and it's always voluntary. Mm, and that is what made me sort of move my schedule around a bit so that I could join this. I've been wanting to join these conversations for some time. Because of various work schedules, I was not able to. And today, the book was interesting, a book that I'm very passionate about, a book that's very dear to me and has helped me through my journey. So I thought this would be a very good time for me to join the conversation.
So
About the book. Sorry, Akhilesh.
beautiful, Ashif, and we would like to love to hear your experiences going through this book and how it has helped you. Yeah. Yes, good that you have now
So
co-creating this space that other people also can get the benefit. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
the pleasure is mine. Thank you for the opportunity. Uh, Specific to this book, I see that interesting in many ways, right? If I look at it uh, purely as a series of events and how the author responded to that event, that's fascinating. He starts by saying he was trained for one ship, but he got deployed into another ship, which is completely different, right? So every dynamic that happens within the ship is completely new for him. He is not aware of it. So this was a situation in which he was put in by whatever forces of nature we want to call it. Um, but he responded to it positively. He could have denied going there. I don't know if that was an option, but I'm assuming it is. He could have said no, I'll not do it, or he could have offloaded a part of his responsibility to others, or he could have even chosen uh, other ways to respond. But he responded as a true leader. He stepped up, and by that he stepped up everyone else on the ship that worked with him, right? So for me, the series of events and responses was also fascinating at one level. And when I look at how it all happened by reading the book, uh, I see that he not only made the right decisions at the right time, but also he brought in some key aspects to his decision. He brought in alignment. Um, in his book, he describes that uh, he was giving an example of when a person would change the filter, right? Um, he knows when the person who has to change the filter, he's not someone who is higher up the rank, right? He's someone who is probably very much lower down the rank, excuse me. Um, but he knows when to do it. So that's the kind of alignment that he has. That's how informed everyone is in the ship. And second, he brought in the idea of decentralized decision making, which some of the agile frameworks talk about today. Decision should be made where the information is most and best available. So he was not always the bottleneck for decision making. He let people who actually had information make the decision. He was not that big boss who would always sign off everything. And later on, if you see, even there was an evolution. He moved from being consulted to just being informed to being their coach, where he even beyond making decisions, he started to enable them to make a decision. For example, when someone came to him saying, this is a situation, what do we do now? He prompts the other person to think like him, where he says, okay, now what do you think I should be thinking about, or what am I thinking about, and how should we be thinking about it, right? So he brought that collective intelligence together. He in a way replicated his brain, his way of thinking all across the entire ship, and all of the crew members were completely aligned to him. And this is something that's amazing. Many organizations would want to do it, but there are various roadblocks, starting from ego to bureaucracy to processes to various constraints that will stop people from doing it. But essentially, an organization that does this, and think about it, if every person in an organization starts to think like the head of the organization, how aligned the organization is, how much of cohesion will exist, how much of co-creation happens, and how well will they be able to create solutions, that just amazed me, and that was for me the highlight of the book.
Interesting. So I do have a kind of a question, and I'm not taking anything away from the experience of the author, more from a challenge we see, right? So probably the fact that he was in a situation where he was put in an uncomfortable state, or in a state where he didn't have much knowledge about what he is going to lead, the system that he was going to lead. Now if the converse was true, right, look at a challenge, a leader who knows everything about the organization or the team that he or she is leading. How do you think this will shape up, or how challenging it would be, or how easy it would be to replicate what is actually being advocated or experienced by the author in this book? And I'm just thinking out loud, because it may be much easier when you think about a situation that I don't know what I'm dealing with, right, in terms of the system. So it's more natural to probably depend on people, and make it happen through them. But what if you, as an agile coach, the expert you are, Deepak, and you are into that situation? How would you then look to really replicate what is done? What challenges would you see? Akhil, again, it's just something that came to my mind.
Yeah, so let Deepak come across, and I will go back to the book again, because we are talking about the book, and I will also talk about my experience in the similar situations. Yeah, Deepak, go ahead.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Deepak. Yes, it came to my mind as you were speaking.
Yeah, thank you, Nivarti, for the question. It's very thought-provoking. Again, I can only speculate what could have happened, right? Again, not putting myself in the author's shoes, but trying to see how I view the situation and the series of events and why that was important. For me, it's mostly comfort zone versus disruption, right? If he had gone to, I think it was Olympia, right? That the ship that he was trained for. So if he had gone to Olympia, then maybe he would have been at his comfort zone. He would know everything. He would know exactly what to do, what not to do. The same model would have replicated or would not have is difficult to say, but essentially he was in a zone of his comfort. He knew exactly what he was getting into, and he knew how to respond to each of these situations. There may be innovation might not happen because you have everything in control, the things are working, etc. Versus this change at the last moment resulted in disruption. So he was pushed out of his comfort zone, and then he had to face something which was new, not something which he had imagined, or not something that he had even thought of, or even prepared for to a large extent. So when disruption happened, new solutions came out that was very innovative. As I said, a lot of it depended on his response. If he would have responded in any other manner, maybe he would not have written the book, and even if he had, it would have been a completely different book in a different line of thought. But I think for me, the answer to your question, Nivarti, is comfort zone versus disruption, and in this case it was a forced disruption.
Yeah, and I have some take on to this. And when I was reading, interestingly, this book, he starts with the leadership definitions or the leadership program which he has gone through, right? He talks about what he was taught as a leader, for a military leader, right? Leadership is the art science or gift by which a person is enabled and privileged to direct the thoughts, plans, and actions of others in such a manner as to obtain and command their obedience, their confidence, their respect, and their loyal cooperation. Right? And if you look at from this if you look at this particular definition, it talks about controlling people, isn't it? It talks about controlling people. And it was also, if you look at this definition, it divides the people into the two different categories, right? I am the leader by the art and the science or by the nature, right? So there was a time when I was called as a gifted leader, and I don't know what the hell that means, right? I was just doing my work, right? And so then the world is divided into two parts, the leaders and the followers. Now, look at the situation as you rightly talked about. It's not that he just got into this space, right? He talks about in the first chapter of the book, which is very interestingly, starting over, he says, how has failure shaped you? So actually, whatever submarine he was trained for and all of that, and the leadership style which he has gone through, right? Whatever he learned, he applied. And he did not get the result that 6 months that which they were on the sail, right? So that failure has the empowerment. The failure teaches us the lesson that something is not working and the working, right? And therefore he started talking about leader follower to leader model. Leader follower model is nothing but dividing the world. I am the great, you are not. I respect you. So this is the way the military has been, right, throughout. And Nivarti, you are a military man, right? That's how exactly the command and control system in the military has worked, right? And what am I reflecting upon is that even in the military, where the command and control system has worked in the knowledge industries or where we have moved in, the command and control is not going to work. If you want to succeed in this kind of situation, you need to sift. And when you need to sift, that sift is called the leader model, which we'll talk about in a while. And when he was going through this failure, in this particular chapter, he talks about, why do we need empowerment? The leader empowers me. He has empowered me to do that. But why do you require empowerment? The question is as a very coaching question, isn't it? That means the empowerment is not there with you. So somebody requires you to empower you. That's what his reflection was. Are you not empowered? Do you require somebody to empower you? Right? How reliant is your organization on the decision making of one person? Right? That's what he was saying. Man, how come these organizations are relying on one particular person to make the decision? Or a small people of the group of the people, right? In this, if you look at the commander structure which was existing, there are only 4 to 5 people out of 130 can make decisions, right? Rest are all followers. Yes or no? Yeah? And that, and he talks about, one more question he asked in this particular chapter is that what kind of leadership model is this? When you think of your own journey in the organizations wherever you are working, right? What is that coming out? And for me, it came out, I have come across at least 16 to 17 leaders, and I'm so blessed that I had leaders in my life, even in starting my career, that who has allowed me to do whatever I want to do and build my department and do my things, right, in the beginning. And again, because I was trained like that, or I had built up that particular capabilities, and at one point of time, I had a command and control guy, right? That person wanted me to do whatever he wants to say, and I was not feeling comfortable about it. And then I had a conflict, and I had to move from that particular space, right? Here, the situation was very different. He failed in the command and control, and therefore said, what can be done differently? To Deepak, to your point, right, that the failure is the modus operandi for the learning, right? You can't be bouncing back if you have not filled. Then otherwise you will feel like it is working, right? Like other sailors, other submarines, right? It was happening. I don't know whether Nivarti have given you the answer to this, to the long one.
Yeah, I think it's okay. So let's look further. I think the question was more from a kind of a practical point of view to say, I understand he was in a state of discomfort or state of uh, out of his comfort zone. He was pushed on that, but my question was more for people who are in the space where they are more comfortable in that situation, right? So that was the question. While I understand the point you are making, that as people in the organization you don't need to be empowered, you should ideally take it, right? But in the practical sense, it doesn't work that way. It's more easy to say, probably, from a theoretical perspective, but
I don't
practical,
think
for all
so.
practical purposes, it doesn't work that way, right? So
No,
then
no,
then the
no.
question is what can leaders, or how can leaders who are experts in the domain where they are leading develop this kind of leadership at all levels? What challenges would they actually face, or they might face, and what can they do to overcome those? That was what I was.
Just let me put this point, right? That, oh man, in the practical sense, Deepak, if you recall this particular book, he had a leader, which is again, he was the commander again in this group, right? He was peeping on the one of the pass by ship, and he wanted to hear what's going on there as a trainee, and then supposed to get the approval from the boss, right? From the captain of the ship. And that captain of the ship was passing by, and he said, "Why don't you ask me that? I want to do this for the learning, for the training. What will happen?" Right? So he had experience of working in that model, leaders and leaders model, right? And therefore he talks about the empowerment and things like that, right? So the people who have not experienced in thinking, feeling about that everybody is empowered, because he felt that he was empowered. Nothing called that something has to empower him, right? So it is only about that the mental model the leaders are keeping that is not practical. It is always thing is a practical, right? The question out here is, and he talks about in this book, and I have experience in my life as well, that how much you are willing to take the risk. What is your risk appetite? What is your failure appetite? Are you taking the failure is not acceptable, or the failure is not going to happen? We are not going to make the mistakes, right? So if your mindset is built that always corrective actions or avoid that failure, because that's a real task to fix it, right? If something wrong happens, right? But where the innovation will come through. So it's a shift of the mindset that this is not practical. It is practical, and he has shown that this is practical. And I can talk from my own experience, and very much beginning in my career in 1996, my boss, no more he is, he empowered me to take the decision. And a particular product which was very much, it's a static ERP system. He said, "Akhil, you are saying that you can make this a dynamic ERP solution. Go ahead and do that. And come back to me whatever the support you require." And trust me, that itself has changed my whole life. I put together, I can do it in 2 years, but I did that whole change of the ERP solution, which we built, in 8 months. Made it dynamic, made it connected to the web and whatnot. Yeah. So that the empowerment does. That particular leaders, that yes, go and make the mistakes and tell me what support do you require, right? And that's where the Nivarti, the model which talks about the leadership model, which he talks about in this book, is in the beginning itself he talks about it. he says that leader approach is the first is the control. Let the control go off. Relinquish the control while retaining the responsibility. So my boss took the responsibility. Yes, we will convert, but he let the control go. Let the people make the mistakes. Let them learn from that and whatnot. And second, he says that only that can happen when you have a competence, right? He talks about people had to be technically. So was I not prepared technically? Yes, I was prepared. I went through the training program. I did a lot of learnings and whatnot before I jumped into that. And he talks about in this book also that how difficult it was for him because he was not trained for that particular submarine. Deepak, if you recall, right? And that's the second thing he talks about, the competence. Equip people with the technical knowledge and resource to make the sound decisions. Make them think based upon the scientific approach, the technical knowledge, and the tools and the resources which they require to make those decisions. If they don't have the resources, they will not be free to make them. They make the mistakes. They will not be free to think about it. That's another thing which he has talked about. And then the third, which is very interestingly, clarity. Clarity. And that clarity is equipped with the clarity on the organization's goals, purpose, and decision-making criteria. So if I have a clarity of what is the purpose, what is the goal of this particular organizations, and what decisions criteria are, what are the things that you need to consider to make your decisions, right? So I think that this is the mindset. This approach requires the mindset shift in the leaders, right? Are they allowing this particular framework to come through, or they are still wanted to live in the world of the laborers who are doing the physical work? So we have moved into the world of cognitive work, but we are thinking that because we have come from that, it has become the part of the DNA, right? It's not that I don't do the control and command at some point of time. That has become so much ingrained in us because we are coming from the industrial revolution. But industry is revolved to the 4.0. It is no more a physical. It is about the mental. It is about the cognitive approaches. And cannot be solved the problems of the cognitive from the physical. At that point of time, command and control was working. But right now, command and control has to relinquish because the shift of method of working, shift of method of thinking has changed, right? And we can't think of for the whole entire organizations or few of the people.
Yeah. So,
And
go ahead, Deepak. Sorry.
yeah, just continuing on that chain of thought, Akhilesh, one of the things that he states in the book as well is that if you treat other people as your followers, they will tend to do that same thing when they become leaders. So the leaders of today were working under the leaders of yesterday, who were working under the leaders of maybe a decade ago. And as you said, from the industrial revolution, the leadership style we've carried forward. And maybe 100 years ago or 200 years ago, we were working these factory setups where people were monitored for their time in and time out. People were believed to be intellectually subpar, and they had to be governed, or they had to be monitored at every point in time. Every step they did had to be overseen by someone who's an expert or who's their leader. So that mindset sort of carried, and juniors saw this as the only style of leadership, and they started to sort of display the same leadership when they became leaders, and that continued from one generation to the other. And that's the reason where we are now. And what this book also hints upon is that we are intellectual people, right? We bring in our minds, our intellects to our work. It's not physical labor anymore. It's not physically or labor intensive work that we do, but rather it's our knowledge that we are paid for. And this is a whole new domain. It's a completely different domain of management and leadership as compared to managing a group of people who are just laborers who bring in their physical self to work.
There is very interesting thing you put together, and just continuing to what you said. When he looks at that, he asks one questions in the beginning of the chapter 2. Are you and your people working to optimize the organizations for their tenure or forever? Okay, and he makes a point that to promote the long-term success, I had to ignore the short-term reward system. So how is the reward system in your organization, right? That also brings a command and control, because I'm going to reward it what I have done right now, right? So I wanted to make sure that this goal is done, and therefore I will get rewarded, I'll get promoted, whatever that is happening, right? But the whole, and because of that command and control works, because that I'm going to be rewarded, I'm going to be promoted, I'm going to become something, whatever that right now the short-term objective if I fulfill, right? By the reward systems, recognition systems in our organizations is distinct of the past, right? Apart from this command and control, the reward and recognition systems are also motivated by the past. They are not the new systems, right? And he asks many questions that, are you and your people working to optimize the organizations for their tenure forever? He asks some questions. Go and reflect back. Do people want to be missed after they leave? What can we do to incentivize long-term thinking? We are not about having this, right? We are short durations. I did this 6 months program, I'm getting rewarded. I'm not getting anything that what I have done for the long-term basis, right? And I can give you one, Deepak, one of the example in India and your company, your current company kind of organizations were invited by one of the organizations in India. I'm not going to name it. And there are a number of organizations who were asked to come and present their view that how this particular organization should do, right? Everybody came with 10 years of their strategic plan for this organization. Strategic plan for this particular organization. Everybody presented. At the end of the day, they were asked to leave. They said, man, we are already capable of developing ourselves 10 years plan. We know strategically 10 years what exactly we should do. We are looking for, you guys are so good that we thought that you will come with a 25 years, 30 years down the line, how we should be working. What should be our strategy for 30 years down the line, right? So even the organizations which are looking for this kind of things, they are looking long-term thinking, right? And therefore this organization in our country is very successful because they have a long-term thinking. So we need to also rewarding the people who are long-term thinking, not about just their tenure, not that particular 189 days of round tripping and coming back and getting rewarded for that, right? What we have changed, what we have brought to that level, and that requires a mindset. It's not only the command and control, but the systems which is in place that requires also to be thought through. Yeah. And then you will see that their incentives are different, and therefore they will start changing their minds as the leaders.
True. So I was reminded of as you were speaking, Akhilesh, I was reminded of one WhatsApp forward which I got some time ago. I'm sure you might have seen it as well. Is that 5 years ago, anyone during their HR interview, all of us were asked, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? 5 years ago, nobody would have ever said that I would be working from home because of COVID, right? So that's one way of strategically thinking, right? Where will I be 5 years from now? Where will I be 10 years from now? Where will I be 20 years from now? And that holds a lot of value. But in reality, what we're seeing happen today is the average lifespan of CEOs is reducing year by year, and in some cases it's only 2 years. So which means every second year you have a new CEO coming in with new ideas, new thoughts, new direction, new perspectives. Not that it's right or wrong, but given the pace of change of leadership is so frequent, do you still think that companies should have a 20, 30, 50 year horizon in their mind when they're planning something strategic?
Wow.
Because for all you know,
A very good question.
a new wave of leadership would come in. And what I've seen also in some cases, when the CEO changes, the top leaders also tend to get shuffled or changed or moved among departments, right?
Yeah, sure.
As a part of realignment.
I'm going
So
to
how do
attempt to
we-
give this answer. I'm all of a sudden, right, like I'm jumping into that, and I'm not going to contest that. Yes, 2 years and people will change, right? This particular organization which I'm talking about, I'm not going to name it, okay? I have huge respect for this organization. There are changes which is taking place, right? That the organization purpose is not going to suddenly change in 2 years. You can change the person, but not the purpose in 2 years, right? The objectives of the organization is not going to change in 2 years' time, right? So what was he looking at from the strategic perspective? Strategically, what should be the real purpose of these organizations 30 years down the line? How we should be serving the nation? How should we be serving our customers? How should we be serving the world, right? You might change the actions, but the long-term perspective, the long-term goals are not changing, is what I believe this organization was looking for, right? How are we going to serve the country? How are we going to serve our customers? And how are we going to serve the world at large, right? And of course, we are in the agile world, the things are going to change. By the way, just to laugh, when I left my job in 2013, I said I'm going to work from home. And most of the work I will do from here, right? And we shifted my coaching program doing over the telephone rather than going and meeting the clients, right? So there are some people like me who have not thought that this will happen, but it happened. And I know many people who thought of
You
doing
got the answer right to that question.
Yeah. But then, we're not knowing that pandemic is going to happen, but there are a number of organizations who watched what Microsoft chairman of the past has said, that there are something will happen and will not be able to. And there are companies now they have started thinking about, because they have learned from the pain, right? That's the one thing he talks about. The pain teaches us, the failure teaches us that why are you not thinking like that, right? So yes, you will change, but there are historical views that you need to carry. Okay, and there is a book called, I just recently read one book, Three Systems. It talks about what you should keep using from the past and forget about the rest, right? One of the guy which he's talked about, I'm not going to name him in this conversation of this book, but yeah. And then it depends upon the third thing which he talks about. What is your level of commitment to bring this long-term changes? Look for this long-term things to happen, right? Not the short-term gain. How are you going to look for the change, right? And that requires, as Nimati was talking about, what is that your willingness to take the risk, personal risk, right? Okay. What is you as a leader is personally willing to give up mentally and emotionally control? You need to think through, right? Mentally and what are you going to let this control go, right? What will happen? This is all micromanaging. So it talks about what is the hardest thing that you would experience when you let go this micromanagement, right? That requires, Nivarti, you as a coach, to help these leaders to come out, right? Man, what is that you are going to happen if you leave this micromanagement? What is the reason that they are not letting go this micromanagement, right?
I think one more point the author talks about, I think very clearly in the book also, is about the guiding principles to make the right decisions, right? So it's not so much about just giving the authority to make decisions, because many times it might happen that they know the context, they make the right decisions, but as we were discussing, does those decisions align with the purpose that we as an organization are living for, right?
Mm.
So how do you then provide the right guiding principles to say, if I have to make a trade-off between providing value to the customer and another decision that is reducing the cost of producing that value, how do I make that trade-off as a person who is making that decision, probably at the bottom layer of the organization, right? So then what also becomes quite important to empower and bring down that risk profiling, or risk that we were talking about,
Mm.
by empowering the risk of failure, is, we as leaders, are we equipped enough ourselves to be able to put realistic trade-off guiding principles for the people to make the right decisions when they are at the crossroads?
Mm. Very interestingly, and I don't know what I'm hearing from. In this book, and I said that he said that, boss, you have given the decision criteria, as you rightly says, all the guiding principles, right? And then there is one question comes: Are you curious? Are you curious? Are you asking the question to them, or are you listening their questions? Right? Right. So he talks about, are you asking question to make sure that you know, or to make sure they know. So the question is, when they are making the decisions, do they know what criteria they need to follow? Do they know the purpose of the organizations? Do they know the objectives, the goals which is set for that, right? So do you have to be a smartest person in these organizations, or the dumb person in these organizations? The thinking is yours, is what he talks about it is, right? So the moment you,
that also brings down to a point that we are talking not just about vision being percolating across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
We are also talking about the purpose percolating across the organization.
Exactly.
Right? So from that point of view, and I'm just bringing that point out to say that unless each and every person in the organization, each and every team in the organization is not really clear about the purpose they are serving, how their purpose is connected or aligned or fulfilling the organization purpose overall, then we would always be questioning to validate than questioning to to be curious.
Yeah, very interestingly, deep down everybody is clear about the purpose and the objectives of the organization or that particular team or whatever, right? If the purpose is not clear, you cannot get the commitment, right? The clarity is that one of the more things you talk about, clarity of the purpose, clarity of the objectives, and clarity that, as you talk about, the guiding principles, right? And he talks about in this book is that 2 books he talks about. One, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in the mind. What is the purpose? Why are we doing what are we doing? He brings that book also, right? Start with the why. So he says that, boss, if you want to get into that, these are 2 places I can point it out to. Become clear of why are you doing what you're doing, and begin with the end in the mind. Right? It's Stephen Covey, right?
Yeah, Stephen Covey is.
Yes, he has forwarded this book and he has wrote very beautiful about it. And you very rightly said that purpose is very, very important part of it, right? And if you don't have that purpose, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. So again, it's just to recap. So we are talking about because whenever we talk about transformational leadership, which is kind of a buzzword or a flavor in the market today, because everything we do is termed as transformation. So when we talk about transformational leadership, essentially everybody relates it to clarity of vision.
Mm.
But what is coming out from this discussion, it's more clarity of purpose. Because ultimately the vision that we have as an organization, the vision we set on or set our journey on should be towards fulfilling our purpose of the organization.
Yeah.
Right? And ideally, if you are able to percolate or break down that purpose to every level in the organization,
Yeah.
and you have the right alignment of that purpose across the diverse levels of the organization, you are more or less empowering and equipping them to make the right decisions,
Right. Right.
not just limiting to the vision.
Yeah. 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 And for that again, you go back into the details of it. Then he talks about that the culture, right? The culture of decision making, how exactly this is taking place, right? What are the simple things that you can do? And the beautifully, so he brings the purpose, and to make that change, orient towards that culture, orient toward that purpose, we have to build the culture, right, of making the decisions. So it goes into that. I think we have another 3 minutes, so let's conclude. No?
Yeah. So overall, what I am taking away from this whole discussion essentially is to be clear about the purpose that we are serving or we are living for from across different levels of the organization, and make it clear to each and every individual. Then probably whenever they are coming to the crossroads, they make the decisions which align with the purpose they are there to serve, right? And that means our priorities as an organization is very clear, because the purpose will be built upon our values and principles that we live by.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, very interestingly, I mean, he says that, boss, while doing this, are you intending to help people to find out the right answer? They are making these decisions. Are you intending them to make the right answer, or helping them to get to there? Please allow them to make mistakes, right? So they will find out, they will experience, and they'll come out, right? And he talks about his own experience, and I've also seen it, that there is another thing. This is called the micromanagement. If I go in a subtly, right, Deepak, that I'm trying to help you guys to get to the right answer. Who are you to make that decisions, right? Let them fail, let them think through, let them come out, right? And that reminded me the collective wisdom, or the wisdom of the crowd. So here is the wisdom of the team, right? Let the people use their wisdom to come out with the answer, and not help them to find out the answer, because that will be, again, it is your thinking, they are again using it, so that again is a control. With that, I think a very interesting learning from you while discussing with you two gentlemen, and with the very good questions.
Okay, wonderful. Again, it was nice to have you, Deepak, join us after a
It
long
was nice
time.
to
It's
be
nice
here.
to
My
see you.
pleasure.
Yeah, and
Deepak, let's connect. Can we do a 3.5 hours workshop on this book, because you have that experience, and help the people learn from this. And Nivarti can organize it, and we both or three of us can facilitate a workshop around it. It will be nice for our community to take it now.
Sure, Akhilesh. Happy to contribute. Let's connect and see how we can make this happen.
okay, for everyone, you should rather look forward to a workshop that we are looking to organize based on the book and the workbook that is published by the author. So please look forward to that. And thanks, Akhil and Deepak, for joining us. I look forward to having you back again in 2 weeks' time with another book that we would explore. Thank you, everyone. Have a good, safe week ahead.
Thank you so much, Nivarti.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.